is a meeting of the Development Control Committee, Wednesday the 19th of June 2013. And my name is Horace Mitchell. I'm the chairman of the committee, councillor. And I'll explain who everybody is. The members of the committee are the sage and wise people sitting in the front rows either side of the chamber, and my deputy chairman, Councillor Sherlock, plus Councillor even sager and wiser, Councillor Leeks, who's just in the corner there. Everybody else around the centre here is officers who will present the paper and answer questions and comment where appropriate and give us guidance on the legalities and other matters. When we get to the application paper, there's only one application for consideration. I'll go into the process of how we deal with the application and speaking at that point. First, to tell you that we aren't expecting a fire drill, so if something sounding remarkably like a fire alarm goes, it is probably a fire alarm, and the fire exit for you fortunate people back there is immediately behind you, and for the rest of us. And if you've been signed in to the building, please don't rush away. Please meet downstairs just in the edge of the Memorial Park so that we can make sure that the building has been evacuated. If you run away, we'll have people searching the building and getting themselves set on fire. So don't run away if there is a fire. Let's hope there isn't. We don't usually have a fire. The meeting is being webcast, and those who come forward to speak, the system is automated such that when you press the button to speak, the webcast picks up your image. Are there any apologies for absence? We have some absentees, but I'm not sure I've had any apologies. We're missing at the moment, I think, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Miller. Is anybody else missing? Anything known? Councillor Goddison.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barnes did ask me if I could go and fetch him, because he unfortunately wasn't able to drive himself. I picked up the message so late that I wasn't able to do so. So I do offer his apologies on his behalf.
We will count that as an apology for absence. Councillor Tomlin.
I do know Councillor Miller is on holiday, and I'm surprised he hasn't passed his apologies through somebody somewhere. So.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bound, anything known? No? No. Okay. We are quorate, so it doesn't matter too much. I'm not aware of any resignations or replacements. No. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. There are no urgent items or announcements. The minutes of the meeting held last week on the 12th of June will be confirmed at our next meeting on the 10th of July, and I assume the previous meeting's minutes were confirmed on the 12th of June. Thank you. There are no referrals from other committees or the council. There are no issues referred by the cabinet, and we have to move on then to the applications for planning permission and public participation on the application. We have one application, land at Kennel Farm, and what I'm going to do is firstly ask the officer to present the paper, but the first speaker on the application, we take it in the order of parish and town councils. I think we have two parish councils to speak. If the representative from North Waltham is here, if you could come forward to the front row. Is there a representative from North Waltham Parish Council? No? Is there a representative from Dummer? If you come forward. Thank you, sir. If you sit on that side, the first row, first seat, it says in front of you, public speaker. We will find out. We will find out who you are in a moment, but I'll explain the process. The process is we ask the officer to present the paper. We then hear from all the speakers. The speakers each have 4 minutes, although in the normal course of events, if there's more than one speaker, public speaker as opposed to parish council speaker, objecting to the application, we normally allow 4 minutes between them. If we have two, we will allow 2 minutes each. If there are three, which I suspect there may be, we will allow 6 minutes on this occasion. And then we'll have speakers in support of the application, and then councillors, visiting councillors who wish to speak on the application. So first, I'll ask the officer to present the paper.
Thank you, Chair. This is the outline planning application for the erection of up to 310 residential units comprising 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom units, including affordable housing, new access from Winchester Road, the A30, a new pedestrian link from Winchester Road, internal access road with open space and landscaping. There is an update which has been circulated. Page 1 of the update discusses where the members viewed this.
Do you all have a copy of the update paper? It's a little sheet set of papers. You do. If we could just make sure everyone does have a copy of the update, please.
So the first page of the update discusses where members viewed the site last Friday, viewing the site, the adjacent Old Down Recreation site, and then also going out into the countryside to look back onto the site. Page 1 then continues about the debate with the woodland edge, which is discussed in the main pages at page 39. And we've had revised plans in which plot the existing fence on the site and the existing trees in the sink and show the 20-metre buffer. So now condition 25 has been changed to reflect that, to say that the woodland edge will now be the fence and not the canopy. Then on page 2 of the update papers, the housing figures have changed from 770 to 748 dwellings. Also then, as page 48 of the main papers, Thames Water were asked the council to liaise with them if there was a recommendation for approval. We have done that, and we've had confirmation that Thames Water is satisfied with the wording of condition 28. We've had confirmation through that the applicants have agreed to an off-site contribution secured for allotments. And the decision notice referred to on page 21 of the main papers was missed off the main papers, and it's attached as an appendix to this document. The conditions have been modified. Condition 1 has been modified to reflect the amended plans received. Condition 6 has been modified to reflect the amended plans received and also to secure landscape principles detailed in Annex 14 of the environmental statement. Condition 25 relates to the woodland edge. Archaeology was discussed in the main papers and the need for it on page 50, but it was missed off the document. And then finally on page 4 of the update, there's a final condition about services not through the sinks or the buffers to prevent damage to the root systems. And then there is the decision notice document that was referred to in the main papers.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the confusion about parish councils. I was given to the understand before the meeting that we were expecting to hear from both Dummer Parish Council and North Waltham. I hadn't noticed that Dummer had been missing from the list. But I assume there is nobody here from North Waltham, as an adjoining parish, I assume. Well, so it's down to you now. You, in that case, have 4 minutes. If, when you speak, you could press the big black button, and then when you've finished, if you stay there, we have an opportunity for members to ask you questions. And I'll remind you that when you answer the questions, you press the black button. When you finish, you press it again. It's tedious, this, but it's the only way to clear it for the webcast and those who want to look at it subsequently. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. As I stated, the site is actually in the parish of Dover. The Kennel Farm site is in the countryside outside the Basingstoke settlement policy boundary. It extends the ridge line that separates the town from the rural environment. and development would compromise that strategic separation. It's visible in long views from the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding national beauty. Nature England commented that as the site's within 5 kilometres of the North Wessex Downs AONB, consideration should be given to the direct and indirect effect upon the designated landscape. This comment has never been addressed. The site is bordered on 2 sides by sinks. The Old Downs sink separates it from the urban area. Development would create an isolated community with weak connections to the town and to the local amenities. The members of your committee who viewed the site saw that there is a very significant fall in the level across the site away from the A30, and that they had to walk a considerable distance in their viewing. The development is separated from the Beggarwood local centre by the busy A30, and the local centre is a further 400 metres beyond the A30. It's unlikely that occupants would walk or cycle and even walk to the bus stop on the A30. As a result, the majority of journeys from this site would be made by private car. Development's already approved for 62 dwellings on Kenshot Park Industrial Estate, and this is likely to increase to 73 in the near future. This development, plus the approval of Kennel Farm site this evening, would add to the congestion on the A30 and would result in extended journeys to school for children, since schools are located beyond the light-controlled Beggarwood Junction, the Wallop Drive roundabout, and the heavily congested Kempshot roundabout. In addition, Thames Water requires mitigation work to increase the capacity of the sewage system on the Winchester Road near B&Q before this development commences. That work's likely to cause yet more congestion to traffic on the A30. This site's unsustainable, and its development would prejudice decisions on the emerging local development framework. It's essential that the LDF plans for the improvement of the transport infrastructure are complete and the location of new schools is decided before any additional development is permitted on this section of the A30. I urge you to reject this application.
Thank you so very much, and stay there if you will for a moment, and thank you for being so admirably brief. Do members have any questions for the Parish Council? Thank you very much. So if you retire to the back. We now ask objectors to the application to speak. I have Mr. Beavers, Mr. Napier, and J.M. Rotherer. Are you all here? Just for convenience, if you'd all like to come forward, I assume you're all speaking separately. That's fine. If you'd just all come forward and elect amongst yourselves somebody for the hot seat. I have Mr. Beavers first in the list of speakers, so and if the other two could just sit behind or to the side, whatever's convenient, for a moment. Just sit to the other side, sir. Just sit to the other side. Just sit to the other side. That's fine. Thank you. Could whoever's making ringing noise please switch off whatever's ringing. Thank you. We have 3 speakers. I will allow 2 minutes each. It's normally 4 minutes for all speakers. And if you would like to start, Mr. Beavers, and it might be convenient to members to wait till you've all finished and then ask questions, or you can say, no, I'd prefer members ask me questions when I've finished. How do you feel? Well, unless members have a different view, we will wait until we've heard from all 3 of the objectors, and then we will ask them questions, and they can leave it. You've all got a microphone, by the way. Sitting in the hot seat doesn't give you a particular privilege. So you have 2 minutes, Mr. Beavers.
Thank you, Chair. The release of the NPPF demonstrated that pages of indigestible policies do not work. They haven't. Hampshire has lost 50% of its ancient woodland in 70 years, and recommendations like this one demonstrate why. Even that figure does not take account of ancient woods still standing, but irreparably damaged. England has less woodland than anywhere in Europe. Only 2.6% is ancient, and most are unsustainable, disconnected fragments. If not now, at what point does this nation say enough is enough? The NPPF makes the protection and enhancement of ancient woodlands a vital planning consideration and passes responsibility to local authorities and communities to make decisions that are right for us. We have proposed a local plan that provides a context and detail that is robust and sustainable, unlike the one proposed by the developer. And we have no financial or personal stake, only an interest in environment, community, and future generations. So past mitigation has not worked, and neither will this recommendation. Optimistic statements do not make good planning decisions. The evidence of past failure surrounds us, as well as being in the statistics. This is not an argument about building houses, but building them in places and in numbers where they do least harm, i.e., in a way that is genuinely compatible with the three principles of sustainability, not just one of them. You have the devolved powers of the NPPF, the guidance of Standing Advice for Ancient Woodland, Biodiversity 2020, the NERCAC, the Independent Panel on Forestry report, and our own council plan. Please use the powers you have to signal a decisive break from devastating past practice. Why should the short-term interests of the developer take priority over a national environmental need that has become so acute?
Could wind up quickly, please.
Please reject this application. Thank you.
That was quick. If you could just press your big black button again and just stay where you are. And then I have Mr. Napier next. Again, you have 2 minutes. Yep, if you say who you are, and then you have 2 minutes and press the big black button.
My name is Stafford Napier. I'm from the South Western Action Group, which is a group of people from North Waltham Parish Council, Downlow Parish Council, and the Kempshott District Residents Association. The officer's report compares the refusal of Marnell Park on the grounds of prematurity with this application and says, in the Marnell Park application, the prematurity case was supported by the position that the development was considered unsustainable. It is our case that this particular site is unsustainable as well. The local plan and the NPPF give a definition of sustainability as a location in that it should be easily accessible to employment, education, retail, etc. by means other than by the private car. On these policy measures, the report agrees that this development would be, and I quote from the report, marginally sustainable. Therefore, the difference between this and the refusal of Marnell Park is a subjective judgment that one is unsustainable and the other is marginally sustainable. We contend that Kennel Farm is equally, if not more, unsustainable. I won't have time to go through all the things, just let me mention a couple, which is the distance from the major employment areas. It's 9 kilometres from 80% of the town's employment areas by area. It is 7.3 kilometres from the town if you drive, not 5.8 as said in the report, and there are 104 buses that serve the site, not 220 as the applicant claims. If you're looking for a reason to recommend refusal, the officer gives the grounds. It says applications for housing could be justifiably refused if the cumulative effect would be so significant that granting permission could prejudice the DPD by predetermining decisions. Kennel Farm would cumulatively prejudice decisions on the golf course, the possible inclusion of Hounsome Fields in the DPD, and other things like Area N and Kempshott Park. In summary, this application should be refused on the grounds of prematurity and unsustainability. We all know that in reality, approval of this will lead to a car-based development stuck like a prominent carbuncle on the summit of Basingstoke's southwestern ridge. Thank you.
Again, thank you for your brevity, sir. And it's Mr. Rotherer. Have I got that right, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. And if you could say
Thank
who
you, Chairman. The Kempshott District Residents Association represents well over 500 paid-up households in the ward and is the longest established residents association in Basingstoke. The association has objected to this application for a number of reasons, but I do not intend to refer to all of these tonight. What I can say is that the association fully supports all the reasons for refusing the application, which have been well set out in Mr. Stafford Napier's address to tonight's meeting, and I do not intend to cover the same ground. The Basingstoke Planning Authority was established and came fully into operation in April 1974. If tonight's committee proceeds to approve this application, it will create a remarkable precedent in the history of the Planning Authority. This would be the first time in almost 40 years consent has been given for a major housing site and currently a potential local plan allocation in the Basingstoke town area without having passed through the complete local plan process, including examination at a local plan inquiry. There would clearly be no opportunity to compare the suitability of allocating this isolated outlier site for housing with any of the other proposed allocations, and this cannot be right. In 1997, the inspector who took the inquiry into the then local plan concluded in his final report that development in the southwest part of Basingstoke would breach the ridgeline and be severely detrimental to the rural setting of Basingstoke and would have an unacceptable, harmful effect on the character and appearance of the rural landscape. He continued to say that development would very effectively erode the dramatic transmission from a completely rural environment that provides such a valuable aspect of the setting of the town. This association, Kempshot, agrees totally with the inspector's findings. Once the ridgeline is breached in this area, there will be no stopping further development taking place to the southwest towards North Waltham, Dummer and Oakley.
So
How
if
long
you could
before the
finish quick,
applications...
Sir, if you could finish fairly
And
quickly.
just one more sentence. How long before the applications are submitted for large distribution depots around Junction 7 of the M3 motorway?
Thank you. I'm very sorry to interrupt. Members, any questions for our visiting speakers? If you wish a particular if you want to address it to a particular speaker, please say so. Councillor Taylor.
Could I just ask Mr. Napier, I know you're a little bit of an expert on Junction 7 of the motorway. Could you just tell us about that junction, if you've got any, if there's any perceived effect of this development on that particular part?
Yes, so just a couple of things to say. One is that the division of traffic generated by this site, which the Hampshire County Council believe is going to be 70% towards the town and 30% towards the motorway. The actual analysis of the morning AM peak traffic at the Beggarwood Lights shows roughly a 50-50 split. So I think there will be much more traffic going towards the motorway. And Junction 7, while Junction 7 itself may be, if you like, have capacity, there is a significant problem on the bifurcation at Junction 8. That's where the road splits to the 303 and the M3. And if you've ever tried to join the motorway going south at Junction 7 and you wish to go down the M3, you will know if it's busy and there is fast traffic, you are literally taking your life in your hands trying to cross in that very short distance. And the Highways Agency have expressed in the past serious concern about a greatly increased amount of traffic joining the motorway at that point.
Councillor Leeks.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, one of you said about the buses. Can you repeat the number of buses that you said and the difference, rather? Thank you. Hang on.
Yes, in the applicant's application, they quote 220 buses. That is a joint number of Jazz 1 and Jazz 5, there's only one bus that goes past the site itself. And if you look at the timetable, and that's how I come to the figure, and you actually add it all up, Monday to Friday there are 104 buses during each day, if you like. So don't get the impression of 220 as a little bit misleading. I can see how they got there, but...
Can I just clarify, that's 104 potential journeys? Yes. It's not 104 buses, it's 104 journeys. Right, just checking. Any other
Yes.
questions for... Yes, Councillor Leeks.
I'm just going to go back to that, as I'm not aware of the bus stops up there. So how far would it be you say that the Jazz 2 goes past the site, or is it Jazz 5 that goes past the site? And how far is it to the other one, if you like? Hang on.
Yes, I'm sure the officer can do that. But in fact, there are two buses. One of them, if you take the Sainsbury's, the Sainsbury's bus stop, there are two buses that serve that, Jazz 1 and Jazz 5, but only one of those services goes round through Beggarwood, and the nearest bus stop, perhaps, I don't know if you can indicate it, the nearest bus stop is actually on Beggarwood Lane. At the moment it comes out of Beggarwood Lane and turns towards the town, and the applicant is proposing a bus stop on the A30, moving a lay-by from where it is at the moment, close to the town, and proposing a lay-by into which the service that goes through Beggarwood would stop. And that's the one that's 104.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Could I just ask Mr. Beavers a question? You gave us a rather broad sort of reason why you thought that this wasn't a good idea. But as a sort of a bit of an expert in the subject of nature conservation, could you just say a little bit about what you specifically think is going to happen to the sinks that will be affected by this development?
The ancient woodlands are very narrow, as little as 12 metres in width, a single tree. They're important in the landscape because they provide connectivity. In fact, if you include housing fields, there's 1.5 kilometres. They're already stressed, significantly stressed. The National Planning Policy Framework makes very clear that they have to be looked after, but not least because of the soils, not just the woodland, but the soils, which are so important. They're the last of the unploughed land that we have. And with so much pressure from people on there, and pets, any wildlife, any bacteria, plants on those sites are under enormous pressure. The only thing that's going to relieve pressure is actually some space within which this wildlife can exist. At the moment it doesn't, and even better management would not significantly change things. The only way that we're going to make these woodlands worthwhile is to give them space and to expand the woodland a little bit, not very much I might add, in our proposal, and provide the capability for wildlife, and that's plants as well as fauna, to be able to move through the landscape. And that's a key part of the role of these woodlands, and that's the kind of role that all the woodland guidelines have reinforced.
Can I just, again, try to clarify that? The woodlands, the narrow strips of woodland that you're referring to, which could be enhanced, which is clearly desirable, what land would be used to enhance them?
In our proposal, we've suggested that one or two enough width for one or two canopy trees of the type that are already in that wood would take up round about 25 metres. And then the rest is woodland edge. So it would be transitional habitat with shrubs down to grassland, which you need to be able to provide connectivity. But remember, two trees, when they reach maturity, are going to take up something like 20 to 25 metres. And when they do, and if they're 15 metres closer to those houses, and they reach a height of 30 metres, which is possible. There'll be no ploughing. The houses will push away some of the wind. And we would also have trees that are that much closer than the new houses. We have to think 50 years ahead, not just, you know, a year ahead or 2 years ahead.
So is it your proposal, just because everybody won't have a copy of your proposal in front of them, I don't suppose, is it your proposal that if a development were to go ahead here, that land should be specifically provided for this purpose?
Absolutely. We've proposed that to be sustainable, there should be a 50-metre buffer. And as I've just explained, just to put into... Sorry, yeah.
I work in ancient woodland.
Sorry.
Now and again. I don't really have the energy to do it as often as I should. Thank you for that. Maybe the applicant will comment on, maybe one of our officers will comment later. Any other questions for our speakers? Thank you all three very much. If you'd like to retire to the back, and then we have the applicant and the agent, Mr. Rees and Mr. Brocklebank, I believe, if you'd come forward. And again, if you can sit in both seats there, and your microphones both work. And just to wait for a moment. Somebody's ringing again. It's a hearing aid. Oh. I can hear it. I probably don't need one. Right, you have 4 minutes between you.
Chairman, members of the committee, good evening. My name is David Brocklebank, and I'm the Managing Director of Waits Developments. It's accepted that your council has an acknowledged housing land supply shortfall, and that government policy is to encourage the delivery of sustainable development in these circumstances, and with that, sustainable economic growth. So it may be helpful to you in considering this application to understand just how Waits Developments operates to ensure that good housing sites such as this, a site that's part of your emerging local plan for housing and with very little opposition, can continue to contribute towards delivering new homes quickly. The Waits Group is well known to the town, having been involved in the Moors refurbishment and building the Everest School campus. As part of this group, my business specialises in bringing forward attractive and well-designed development schemes. Once our sites have gained consent, we enter into joint ventures with leading house builders. We provide funding, secure final approvals on the detail before our partners build and sell the market and affordable homes. At the end of 2012, we had approaching 1,000 homes with consent and in development on 13 Waits joint ventures with partners. A local example is at Picket Peace near Andover, shortly to be built by partners Barrett and David Wilson Homes, and at Kennel Farm, if consented tonight, we'll invest our own money in delivering a great housing scheme for the borough. Finally, I would like to thank your officers for their constructive advice and approach in consideration of this proposal, and I'm now going to ask my colleague Chris Rees of Savills, who will address some of the planning considerations. Thank you.
The suitability of land at Kennel Farm has been thoroughly assessed by this council over a number of years, with the site having been identified for 350 homes by the council in 2011 and included in the plans submitted to the Secretary of State. When assessed against all other options, the council continued to support delivery of this site, which was reflected in the inclusion of the site within the draft local plan as agreed by Cabinet. Waits embarked on a significant period of public consultation informing this application, with exhibitions and subsequent meetings with local groups. The result of this process has been 29 letters of objection, an extremely low level of objection for such a housing site. To put some context on this for members, the number of families who would benefit from the affordable housing alone on this site would outnumber those that have objected by 4 to 1. The application itself is an outline, and we are only seeking detailed permission for access at this time, with all other matters, including the total number, site and appearance of the housing, for your approval at a later date. One of the key issues that we have addressed as part of the application is the protection of the long-term maintenance of the woodland belts and the sinks. Consideration of the tree belts, buffer space and their future management have been given significant amount of time to ensure they are robust, resulting in support from the proposal from the council's ecologist, tree officer and Natural England. We provide a buffer of between 20 and 30 metres, which is above the policy requirement. It is neither the view of your officers, our experts, adopted local policy or national policy that a 50-metre buffer is required. Furthermore, 42% of the entire proposal is green infrastructure. In respect of traffic and access, our proposals have no objection from the county or borough highway departments, with a suite of proposals suggested to come forward. We have been in close dialogue with Thames Water, and it has been agreed that 2 lengths of the existing downstream sewer will be upgraded to improve the local network capacity. The result is no objection from the Environment Agency or Thames Water. In closing then, Chair, if delivered, the scheme will provide £1.3 million worth of highway improvements and potentially £2.3 million worth of new homes bonus to be spent on local initiatives within the area. Finally, the efforts made by Wates in consulting with local residents is evident in the significant low level of objection raised by members of the public, with the benefits of the current and future residents of the borough as a result of the scheme far outweighing any negatives. We would respectfully ask, therefore, that you approve the application.
Thank you. Masterpiece of timing. Questions from members to the applicant? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a question, please, of Mr. Rees? It's about the consultation. Could you just remind us all, please, how you went about advertising the consultation? Thank you.
Certainly. We employed a consultant firm to leaflet drop the area. So they leaflet drop the entire area of Hatch Warren, Gabriel Park and Kempshott. And we held a 2-day exhibition in the Hatch Warren Community Centre. We followed that up with a specific meeting with the Old Down group where we discussed the proposals, in particular the proposals for an outline management plan for the long-term maintenance of the woodland belts and the buffer distances. I should set out that through that consultation, the distances were increased from an original 10 metres to a minimum of 20, and beyond that up to 30 metres. So that sets out in broad terms the consultation process.
Thank you for that answer. And obviously you're more experienced in this than certainly I am. You say that there are that 29 letters of objection is remarkably low. Could you just clarify the attendance at the consultation evenings? How did that compare, please, with other consultation events that you've held?
I believe overall the attendance was lower than we expected. Having leafleted the entire surrounding community, I believe we had around about 110 people attend the exhibition, so 60 on one day, 40 on the other. Off the back of that, we had around 70 responses. We had a leaflet for people to fill out, setting out their concerns and what they thought were the key issues were in terms of the feedback. And then we had some follow-up emails thereafter from local residents because they were welcome to email us and our consultancy firm as well.
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask you, would you be, if outline permission were to be granted, would you be willing to get into pre-submission consultations with local ward members and planning officers so that they could get some sort of input into design, parking, road layout, etc., etc.? Thank you.
Yeah, and the short answer is yes. At this time, the only detail for approval would be the access point and the up to 310 figure. The rest, while we provide an illustrative layout to show that it can be accommodated, all of the detail would be subject for approval and for us to bring forward proposals for the appearance and the layout of the development. So yes, we'd be happy to consult on that.
Just to clarify, the Council has recently introduced a sort of formal pre-application panel arrangement that members can ask for a developer to come and meet with officers and members in a formal setting here in the Council to discuss the detail of a site and for applicants to hear members' views on that before. When it comes to us as a formal application, if it gets to that point, it's too late to say, well, wouldn't it be better to put the park in there or something? So I think the thrust of the question is, would you be happy, assuming officers would support that process, and officers have a problem with time constraints, of course, in terms of how fast we're meant to deal with applications. but would you be happy to engage with that process?
If I may come back on that particular point, it's an experience I've had elsewhere with other authorities where members have formed, particularly on these larger strategic sites, where there is a panel of members, maybe not every member, but a selected group of members, which are formed and meet regularly to discuss the application as it forms. So then there's no surprises when it comes to planning committee.
Councillor Tucker first, then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm just a wee bit confused. You say that the only thing that's being considered is the access, but in the application it does happen to mention open space and landscaping. Is that in or out of this application, or would it be for the details?
At this time, and the case officer may expand on this, we have provided some broad details of landscaping and shown with the illustrative plan the ability to deliver the site with a certain quantum of open space, particularly the non-accessible open space and the buffers and the other accessible green space on the site. But we haven't given all of the detail yet because we're not seeking approval for that, for landscape in particular. The only full element of detail we've provided at this time is access, with everything else reserved. So it's, again, this is something maybe for the case officer to answer, but what we are seeking consent for today is the principle of up to a certain level of housing, up to 310, with the access approved, for then to come back at a later date with the details of the landscaping, in particular, the layout, the appearance of the housing, and the scale of massing.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. One of the expressed concerns is the safety once you try to leave this site. And as I understand it, there's the one access sort of providing a bit of a funnel into the site. Now, our safety policy A2 says that we will grant planning permission where cycling and walking infrastructure are integrated to the development and linked with surrounding networks. And also E1 requires you to provide safe and convenient access for all potential users. Could you just persuade us how these two are fulfilled with that one access, which is just an extra set of traffic lights on the A30? Thank you.
For vehicles entering the site on a daily basis, there is indeed only one access point. As you go up the A30, there is an emergency access point that's provided for emergency purposes, which doubles as a pedestrian and cycle network as well. Beyond that, the pavement is then extended to link into the existing network. So people do not have to leave and enter the site on foot or on bike via the vehicle access point. They can leave separately via the emergency access point. And we've created, when we were looking at the buffer space, and again, when we were speaking to the Old Downs group as well on this, it's about trying to get people out of the woodland area to the north and giving them an alternative east-west route from the Roman Road back to the A30. Because while it's designated as public open space, it's people walking through that woodland belt that you want to discourage. You want to bring them out into the site. So we've created a new footpath and cycleway that runs to the south of the woodland belt, connecting into the public right away from the Roman Road back across to the footpath on the A30. So we have thought about it, and you are perfectly correct. You know, there is one single point of access for vehicles, but we are providing an alternative for cycles and pedestrians.
Could I just ask then, you said that you're creating a footway along the A30, is that right? How far does that footway extend, please? So where will it take these pedestrians and cyclists? It won't take them to town or anything?
Just wait a minute, we'll get somebody to point out on the chart where we're talking about.
Thank you. Could I just ask, is there anything beyond that bus stop then? Where is, you know, does the footpath extend down into Kempshott or anything like that? Or is that the end of it? So, okay, a few metres, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you both very much. We now have two councillors to speak to us, erroneously described as ward councillors. One of them is. The other one is a divisional councillor, but we're going to stretch a point and invite him to speak, and we have 4 minutes each. You can take the batting order either way you wish it. That's if you can agree amongst yourselves.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Councillor Terry Reid, Councillor for Hatchwarren and Beggarwood. You won't be surprised, I imagine, to hear that, first of all, I'm going to take slight issue, very respectfully, with the applicants in terms of there being little local opposition. For a start, I don't consider 29 letters of opposition insignificant. You will see that there was great concern amongst many of those who have written in that the consultation on the application was put in at the beginning of the Christmas holidays. So a lot of people were concerned that many people will have missed it and been unable to, in fact, comment. And also there has been plenty of comment and discussion on local message boards, websites, and as evidenced by councillor inboxes, including my own, clearly. I'd like to oppose this on a couple of matters. First of all, overdevelopment. The site was originally earmarked as a reserve site, and it had a maximum of 250 homes, not the 310 that are currently in the indicative plan. I think even in the officer report, it's conceded this is a dense development, and there is insufficient recreational space. I would agree with previous speakers. The site is not sustainable. I do not feel it's sustainable according to the NPPF. Even the report refers to it as marginal. It suggests approximate walking times to local services and schools. I would suggest these times greatly underestimate the difficulty of the walk, either if you're walking across to Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, or trying to make your way somehow through or round or down to Kempshott. To get over to services at Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, there would have to be obviously to cross the A30. And it isn't very long since we've had a fatal pedestrian accident, actually, at the junction of the A30. So I would suggest a journey of at least half an hour, possibly more, to access schools on the Hatchwarren and Beggarwood side. Similar, probably, journey times for Kempshott, and both these journeys are difficult, I think, on foot for a young family. Also, in terms of amenities, we've just lost Hatchwarren Surgery, which has moved to Southam. So we only have one small surgery now at Beggarwood, serving the whole community of Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, and obviously now this new potential development as well. At Beggarwood, there is no community centre at present, and there is only just a private day nursery. All playgroups, again, are at Hatchwarren, which again is another difficult walk for small children and young families. So the inevitable impact, I think, is likely to be greatly increased car journeys, and I don't think this is fully reflected in the report. The development has been mentioned, obviously puts the highly important sinks at Old Down at risk as well. We cannot ensure, despite the mentioned footpath, that access will be restricted to going round the ancient woodland. We all know that people in general take the shortest possible route. The shortest possible route is likely to be through the ancient woodland, which is therefore greatly at risk. And also, I feel there is insufficient buffering to protect the sinks. We've had a lot of problems at Beggarwood. We have a 15 to 20 metre buffer at Beggarwood. And again, this hasn't been sufficient. There's been great damage to the woodland there.
You have about 3/4 of a minute, Terry.
Thank you. Great damage to the woodland there. Trees have had to be felled because they're too close to the houses, and I fear that we're going to make the same mistake here. I would also, again, take respectful issue with the officers that the recommendation recently from H&E was a mere policy aspiration. The recommendation for a 50-metre buffer to be considered in cases such as this was a unanimous cross-party resolution to Council following an informed discussion, and I think this is highly relevant to this application here, and we should be thinking about that. So I would ask, on these reasons alone, for the committee please to turn down the application as unsustainable, overdevelopment, and putting at risk the sinks of Old Down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions to the councillor, members? Thank you, Lou. Councillor Reid and Councillor Reid. Very good of you to visit us here. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to offer you 3 planning reasons on which rejection of this site could be considered, and they are infrastructure, overdevelopment, and prematurity. On the infrastructure issue, the officer's report says that the Kemshott roundabout has one arm that is operating at capacity at peak times, and that an improvement is to be financed through this application. Simple observation in the mornings and at weekends, however, shows that traffic tailbacks are caused by the Brighton Hill roundabout more than the Kemshott one, and that this development will certainly add load to the Brighton Hill roundabout. I look nervously in Councillor Ayres' direction because he'll know more about it than I do. The report says that the Brighton Hill roundabout requires a step change improvement, and I agree with that. It goes on to say that it would be unrealistic to expect this development to pay for that step change, and I agree with that too, but then it stops. I would make the point that nothing changes the acknowledged fact that a step change improvement is needed to the Brighton Hill roundabout, and that in its absence, any development that adds to the loading on that roundabout is undesirable. Something has happened as well since the initial consultation to which the applicants referred, and I attended that. The Tesco application, which was to fund a step change improvement, has been turned down, and that refusal has been supported on appeal. I put it to you that anything that adds to the load on the Brighton Hill roundabout without mitigation is unsafe until such time that the step change has been secured and funded. On the housing numbers, a point's already been made. The Council has indicated that if developed, this site should be thought of as having capacity for 250 homes. This application is for 310, and I ask you to consider whether that is an overdevelopment of the site on which it should be rejected. Finally, prematurity, and this is the area where my county division might well be affected. At the last public inquiry, the inspector said that a major development area to the west of Basingstoke should not be started until the council knew how it was to be finished. I paraphrase. The council may be taking a risk in planning only the northwest portion of that site, but that's another debate. What I think everyone agrees, however, is that a western bypass will be needed, and it is referred to in the supplementary paper that was put round tonight. But where will it go? The only suggestion I've seen so far is it goes through Old Down, which would be wholly unacceptable. Another option would be this piece of land, as long as it hasn't been developed. I invite you to consider rejecting this site on the grounds of prematurity, given that you really need to know where that road is going to go if the whole of the west of Basingstoke is going to be planned in a coherent manner. To agree this site in isolation from the others is planning on the basis that it will be all right on the night. Well, it won't. The west of Basingstoke needs very careful whole picture planning, and to agree to this application without knowing what the whole picture will look like is, in my opinion, unsafe. It is premature.
Thank you very much. Questions to the councillor? You spoke too lucidly, I'd say.
Thank you,
Thank you
Chairman.
very much. Question.
Could I ask the officers if there's been any assessment of the grade of agricultural land that this field represents, please?
Yes, there was an agricultural soil survey submitted with the application, and that's summarised in the main papers. Just bear with me, I just find it. Towards the end, page 50 of page 62, basically it was 90% of moderate quality and 10% of good quality. and the protecting soils would be the 10% of the good quality. So on balance, it was felt that as it was 90% moderate quality, it was acceptable. The site is chalk with a layer of soil on the top.
Councillor Tomlin?
Thank you, Chair. I have got two questions. The first one has been touched upon in our developing local plan. We are talking 250 houses, and we've heard 350 reduced to 310. It's really as an officer comment on how they see that. That on the one hand, we're getting advice for it can yield 250, and are they comfortable with 310? I don't really read anything in the report that kind of takes a view on that. Thank you.
Just find tab to that bit. On page 24 of the main papers, it looks at density, and it comes out at 32 dwellings to the hectare. It is different to the emerging local plan figure of 250, but it's felt that this is a more detailed scheme. It's looked at the constraints of the sites. Our officer that sort of recommends densities for the local plan was considering sink buffers on all sides of the site, but there isn't a sink on the southern boundary of the site. The front boundary was expected to be bigger as well, but with the noise acoustic surveys that have been done, a level of acceptable development has come through with that to say where the noise would work. Although it's an indicative layout, the green shown on it's not the best plan, so I apologise for that colouring, but if we look at the printed papers, it may be easier. The dark green, which is shown on the outsides of the plan, is non-accessible land, and it isn't calculated in any of the density figures. It's excluded from the density because it has a function, a biodiversity function, a protective function. And the condition number, I can't remember what the condition is, it secures that area of land, I think it's 2.4 hectares, to be non-accessible open space. The light green land shown on the plan, which has actually come out blue for some reason on your printed papers, that is open space land that's required for 310 units. We don't know what the housing mix would be, whether it will be more 1 beds, more 5 beds, more 2 beds, more 4 beds. So our policy has an average occupancy figure, and the amount of green space that's provided on site is calculated from the occupancy. So that's the requirement on site for 310 units. If it goes down, firstly, if the number goes down, the requirement for open space goes down, but there'll be more space to build, more space to have open space. So that's what the indicative layout is showing you. And also it's worth saying that density is only one issue of design. You could have a building that had 5 bedrooms that was the same size building as 3 2-bedroom dwellings, but you've tripled your density, but you've built the same amount of building.
Just to clarify before you come back, this indicative stuff is set. That's not how it might be. This is how it could be. This is how it might work if this was the development that went ahead. I mean, the open space might be differently distributed. This is only conjectural, isn't it?
What that plan shows is obviously the vehicular access, because that's what you're applying for, and it doesn't show it particularly clearly, but it shows the access coming into the site and a turning head which we would secure to be big enough for buses, because the school buses pick up already in the area, so that was to design that into the scheme. What's fixed is the 20-metre buffer from the fence line, and the landscape principle of having the landscaping around the edge as the setting for the site and the development inside. Whether the circles are the kickabout spaces, and the yellow, which is by one of the circles, doesn't show very clearly again with the colouring, is the size of a local area of play, and the circle is the size of a kickabout space that would be required. So it's showing what we would expect to be provided with up to 310 units for open space, and then that's how much little space is left for development.
My second point really is, should we see the site be approved, how does this then sit in our local plan? Am I to assume that it falls out of the local plan and we look for another 250 houses and a site because this has already gone in the housing deficit of years, or because you're going to put 310 in possibly, does that mean the plan loses 60 from somewhere else? I'm hoping, I suppose. Thank you.
I mean, essentially, if planning permission was granted on this site, it would obviously form the base information for how the local plan progresses from there. So a certain level of housing requirement across the plan period would be met already. So potentially it takes the pressure off, if you like, the need to find other sites, although there will still be a need to find other sites, bearing in mind the existing housing supply position.
So, sorry, just my clarification. It's sort of bringing the plan forward rather than. I'm not really getting 100% confidence here that this either is a bit of a plan delivered early, or whether it's a completely satellite thing and we've got to find somewhere else. But
let me see if I can clarify. My understanding of this is that any site that is approved now, whether it's one house or 200 houses or whatever, is another addition to our available land for housing, and therefore it reduces further requirements for available land for housing. So any site that is now approved, for example, as one large site at Appeal, if it was approved, it reduces the amount of sites that have to be allocated and released in the local plan. And to the extent that it was more development than had been thought of at this stage of the local plan, it would make it easier to meet the local plan. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the officers, and it relates to the consultation with Hampshire County Council about education. I note that Hampshire County Council apparently has scoped the proposal and has concluded that there is a need to provide an off-site contribution towards primary education, but not secondary. We know that the primary schools within, the closest primary schools to this area, I believe, are both quite heavily oversubscribed. So my question is, have you asked Hampshire County Council exactly what this would mean, this off-site contribution? How would this ease the already very difficult situation for getting a school place at primary level for the people who will eventually live here? We know that already lots of primary school families have to travel right the way across town to get to a school that has a place for their child.
I have a copy of the Hampshire County Council scoping response here, and at the end it says, details of the facilities or infrastructure on which any financial contribution will be spent. It is planned that modular buildings are placed at Great Binfield Primary School to meet the initial demand for additional school places from this development. A decision on the permanent location for the primary school spaces will need to be made once the overall level of new housing in the area is known. Okay. That's it. That's their justification. They're looking at a temporary classroom, and then once they know the final, I presume their many down figures, they will decide where to put a new school.
You can come back, Councillor. I'm sure the County Councillor is listening to this with some interest.
Just in case anybody isn't aware of where Great Binfield School is, it's quite a considerable distance from this site. I find that quite a strange response from Hampshire County Council.
I don't know where Great Binfield School is. Can you tell me, please? Oh, what? Chilham? Good heavens. Thank you.
Officers would like to return to this question for some reason that baffles me.
I mean, the county are very clear that the Hampshire County Council's Children's Services raised no objection to this planning application, and subject to the payment of the education contribution detailed. So it's I'm just looking for any other justification to see whether it's a typo through it, but
Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm incredibly concerned about this application, and I've written down 4 things here that worry me. One is...
Questions to officers?
Yes, this is for the officers. One is the infrastructure, which Councillor Reid mentioned, and obviously the housing numbers and the prematurity and the unsustainability of the site. And I'd really like one of the officers to please try and assure me that I'm wrong, that on all 4 counts, that they feel that I'm wrong. Sorry.
Well, just to take, I suppose, the prematurity issue and how that links with housing land supply. As is detailed in the report, it's understood that the kind of principles behind the prematurity argument, the application is clearly before the new local plan has been developed. That's not in doubt. I think the issue is that the NPPF clearly recognises that there will be scenarios whereby local plans are either absent or the policies in terms of housing supply are not up to date, which is the case where you don't have a housing land supply. So I think that point needs to be considered in the sense of whether the application is premature or not. In terms of the sustainability, we've heard this evening with regards to the impact of where the site is in relation to public transport links, the need for travel. But I think the NPPF makes clear the sustainability is a much wider issue. It takes into account the environmental issues, which will include the impact of the need for travel. It also defines those environmental issues with regards to whether there's any impact on things like landscape and the protection of the environment. And clearly the officer's report concludes that there isn't an adverse impact on landscape or biodiversity, for example. It also, in terms of sustainability, picks up the social and economic definitions of sustainability. In terms of the economic, the report clearly identifies the potential for construction of the development in itself, but also the potential to provide population to work within the borough as well, but acknowledges the fact that that's a fairly limited amount in terms of that part. In terms of the social side, the definitions of the NPPF again clearly set out housing land supply being met as a particular part of sustainable development as a whole, and it would have to be considered that this does contribute towards that housing supply requirement, along with the affordable housing and housing mixed parts that it provides as well. So overall, the conclusion is, if you take the widest sort of sense of sustainable development, bearing in mind that it's been considered to be marginally sustainable on the location, if you like, just around the transport elements of it, it's a sustainable form of development whereby the presumption in favour of sustainable development then kicks in under paragraph 14. The other aspect to that, paragraph 14 of the NPPF, is that if, for decision taking, it's a requirement to consider whether, if there are any adverse impacts, whether they are demonstrable and significant, but then also to consider whether they would outweigh the benefits of the application as well. So the test is not, is there a preferred scheme? The test is not, are there some adverse impacts? The test you'd have to meet effectively to refuse a planning application, bearing in mind the policy context we're within with the 5-year housing supply, is that would there be significant and demonstrable adverse impacts that would outweigh the benefits? So that's the if you like, the summary of the decision that has to be made.
Could I come back on education? Because I think the county had a typo in their conclusion paragraph, which is the paragraph sentence I read, going back through their text in the requirement for primary school places, because they've made it very clear that there is no requirement for a secondary contribution. Requirement for primary school places. As detailed above, the local schools cannot accommodate the additional demand for school places arising from this development. The Kempshott schools accommodate pupils from the wider area, not just from within their own catchment area. It is not appropriate to expand these schools to accommodate the expected additional 86 primary age pupils, as this would significantly alter the school's organisational structure. It is planned to meet the additional demand for school places by expanding the Parkview infant and junior schools. As the Kennel Farm development is occupied, this should displace pupils attending the Kempshott schools from outside of their catchment area, thus creating space for pupils from the Kennel Farm development at the time of admission to infant and junior schools. The demand for the additional pupils locally will therefore be met by expanding Park View schools, and the developer contributions are required.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure it helps me to understand. So what was the reference to Great Binfield School and modular buildings, please?
I read their conclusion sentence, thinking that would summarise it, but it looks like they've obviously left it over from a previous report. But they're looking to, from the need for it is that the catchment schools, Kempshot takes children in from outside of catchment. Therefore, if they provide space at the Park View School for the children who are coming to Kempshot through parental choice, they can apply there, and if there's space, they can go. They're saying that will then free up the places for the children expected to come from this development who are within the Kempshot catchment as a planned programme.
I had a question, and I wasn't, unfortunately, I was out to the country, unable to make the site visit. The question of woodland, which was raised earlier by Mr. Beavers, who said that some of it is 1 or 2 trees deep. And now, you know, if you say woodland, the picture in my mind is belts of trees. To what extent is the woodland that we're referring to here very narrow lines of trees? I'll come back on the question when you have the answer to that. Just to explain that we are a bit slicker about this when we're in our normal venue. We're not entirely slick. I don't want to give a completely wrong and false impression.
Probably be easier if I stood up for this one as to go to the visualizer. Any more questions for officers, please? David, yeah, and then Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, if I could just start, and I guess the officers would struggle to make a response on this because it's a Hampshire County education comment, but I'm not certain whether they would agree with me. I fail to see how it can be taken for granted that spaces will be freed up in the Kempshot School purely because additional provision is made in Park View, and that parents would want to take their children out of that established place they have in Kempshot, move them back or into that area in Park View, simply because those places become available. It's an unknown, it seems to me, and the likelihood is that Kempshott will continue to have its full capacity that it does now. But I just wanted to ask as well, if I might, on going back to the issue of prematurity, and I know that Mike has made his commentary on this, but in terms of page 52 of 62 of the report, it's under the subheading of conclusion. It's about the third paragraph down, Chairman. Starting with the statement, a decision to approve this application in advance of the local plan is not considered as being premature in light of the scale of the development. I know a lot of these reports are inevitably subjective commentary, but I mean, I read that to suggest that in light of the scale of development means that 310 is insignificant and therefore it doesn't impact upon the local plan. I mean, is that the way that's meant to read? Because my view would be somewhat different to that, I think.
Yeah, it's not. The point it was really trying to make is that if you take the combination of the factors of this particular development, so it is partly the scale, partly the fact that through this report it's considered that it's a sustainable form of development, and the contribution to housing supply as a whole, it's not considered to be premature. If you isolate the scale, if you like, element of it, you may come to a different conclusion. In the report, it sets out that that wouldn't be the case because of the amount of development proposed as a proportion of the overall housing supply requirement. But I think it's important to look at it in a slightly broader sense, taking into account the policy position on housing supply as well. So it's a combination of all those factors, not just looking at scale as an isolated point that concluding paragraph was trying to make.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. My question to the officers is about the access. It has been said, in fact, Councillor Mrs. Taylor asked the question, but I don't think we could answer we expected. You'll have a main access, and as you access that, there is the traffic lights to add more safety. They then went on to say, but don't worry too much about that because there is emergency exit. Now, to me, emergency exit is something that's used for the service, like fire engines, ambulances. Is the same safety applied to the emergency access as would be to the main access? Is it as safe as one suggests?
The emergency access came through as a result of the consultation with the county, and it's required as an emergency access if for an unfortunate event happened at the main access that they couldn't get on. There's not proposed to be designed in a way to make it attractive to anybody else using it, so the emergency vehicles would bump over the curbs, they would go on the path. It is, as it sounds, an emergency access so they can get on the site because there's only one vehicular access to and from the site. They have, with the old down wreck, that I think they have a key to the gates, but I think if it's an emergency, they will just cut gates and poles and fences.
I think the message is it's an emergency for vehicles,
yes,
but pedestrians, it's probably safe. Yes.
That's a question. Chair, is it safe for pedestrians and cyclists? I take it the answer would be yes.
If an emergency vehicle was using it, I presume they'd have their twos and blues on, but you would know that they were there.
But in the normal course of events?
In the normal course of events, it's open to pedestrians and cycles. We can put a condition on for the detailed design of that in terms of preventing unfortunate, indiscriminate use of vehicles, for the detail of which I'm saying that. I can't see whether on this scale, but that's easy as a detail to condition to require that to require it, but it would be emergency with the lights on, I imagine.
No more questions. I throw it open to discussion. Ward member.
Oh, thank you. I thought you'd forgotten that I was the ward member. I almost do, because it is a sort of fairly isolated field on the edge of a main road, apropos of not much. If I could just give my initial thoughts at this stage, and I've tried to be as not predetermine this because I'm on the committee, and I've been fairly careful not to get my thoughts in order too soon. But I did begin to see more when I went on the viewing. I have to agree very much at this stage of what I see. I have to agree with Councillors Reid in that this shrieks piecemeal development. And I think the discussion we just had about schools really does demonstrate that. I mean, it's just not thought through. We're looking at this through a microscope and not through a wide-angle lens. And so, I mean, I know Kempshott quite well, and I can be fairly sure that they won't be going to Kempshott School. They'll be going to Park View School, and that is in South Ham. So they've got a long way to go, and they'll need more than that bit of road that's been promised along the edge of the A30. So I agree that we do have to look at the overall picture of the entire area from Junction 7 right the way up Many Down and beyond, so that we know what this whole area of town is going to look like. And we've got to therefore get things in place in the right time, in the right way. And at the moment, this is just too early to know what anything is going to look like. So it's going to make Basingstoke look jolly scrappy, actually. I mean, I quite liked what Mr. Napier said about it being a bit of a carbuncle on the edge of the A30. It is going to make us look scrappy. And if I could just take a step back and take a holistic view of it all, I'm sure people have got all sorts of things to say about sewage and water runoff and everything, but I like to look at it in terms of community. Because to me, community is the most important consideration when you're looking at housing. And I look at this area, and we went to look at it on Friday, and I think, what would it be like to live here? What would it be like to be living in this field? Because this field is a field, and it isn't connected to anything. And what would it be like to have children? Every time you go out, you have to go onto this very major road. And if you've got teenagers and they want to go out for the evening, that is the only road they can get to, and they've got to cross it. And if you live at the back of this estate and you want to go to the nearest shop, you've got to get right through Beggarwood, and the shop in Beggarwood is quite a way down the road. You're not going to be able to walk it and bring your shopping back, so you've got to get your car out and drive it, and then you've got to negotiate the A30. So I would say marginal sustainability. I would say it's very questionable whether this is really sustainable or not, because it just would be a very strange place to live, and you would have to rely a lot on your car, and you would have to rely a lot on people being able to safely negotiate a very busy road. So those are my initial thoughts on that. And the other thing about this piecemeal development, I think we probably saw when we went on the walk down Fuzzy Drove, which is the most beautiful walk, I think you'd all agree. It's a lovely entry into the countryside. And looking at this development across the fields, you will be able to see it, especially in the winter, because you have got Gabriel Park in front of you, and so the tendency is to say, oh, well, we've already got one housing estate there, another small one beyond. But then this is the incremental, this is the creeping development. I mean, in years to come, then we might be looking at across, obviously we've got Gabriel Park and Kennel Farm, so another one, and so on. And so this is a creeping development, and it is not part of a whole plan. We've got to look at it more holistically. The only other thing I'd say in terms of, I think the ambience of Basingstoke is very important, and our character and our reputation is important. I think we're raising the game tremendously. People don't tend to laugh at Basingstoke quite so much as they did and say, oh yes, that's somewhere I go past on the M3. And actually the entrance from Junction 7 is quite a pleasant entrance. You come down the A30 and it's leafy and it's open and it's attractive. And now suddenly we're going to have this lump of houses right on the A30, much closer than any of the Beggarwood houses or anything like that. And so this isn't a distant housing estate, this is creeping right up to the edge, and it is spoiling the entrance to Basingstoke. And just going to come back now to the community facilities and looking at Beggarwood as a whole. My ward takes in a little bit of Beggarwood. I think we've all established in the past that for some reason community facilities for Beggarwood slip through the net. And they really are a very pleasant jumble of houses, but there isn't much to gel them together as a community. And if we start accepting all these little bitty pieces and not putting something in place that's going to gel the whole lot together, it's just going to get worse. And so I would say, first of all, if we do approve this in the end, please can we ring fence some 106 money, which can go towards proper community facility to serve the whole of the area. And I'd like that recorded in the minutes, please, because this is a plea I've made several times. Please, if we're going to do these little piecemeal things, and I'm asking you not to, but if we do, can we start putting money aside so that something proper will get into Beggarwood, a large community facility, a church, maybe a pub we obviously won't be paying for, but something that will say this is a part of town that's worth living in, and this is a proper community joined together by something. We've got a small bit of Beggarwood that's in my ward, and already there are proposals coming forward for some development there, and they proposed a community room. I don't want a community room. What use is that? This is too big an area for a room. We want something big here. So please, if we do this, let's ring fence some money so that we can do something proper and make this a good part of town to live. But my initial thoughts are completely in line with what Councillors Reid and the three objectors said. This is not sustainable. This is piecemeal. This is just not going to do our town any good. We've got to take a step back and take a wide-angle view and make this western area of town a complete plan. Thank you.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Potter, thank you.
Well, very briefly, really, Chairman, if I may. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Taylor. I mean, I know we sit here, we always have the NPPF hanging over us like a sword of Damocles, and we're reminded continuously about the presumption in favour of development, but it's in favour of sustainable development, and I would say this is not a sustainable development, and quite frankly, I think this is a premature and opportunistic application, and I think we should reject it.
Was that a proposal of some sort? Not yet. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I do tend to agree with Councillor Taylor on her comments there, but other things I'm uneasy with, or concerns with the whole sort of principle we're faced with. I mean, it starts on page 1. Well, I think it's page 1, but the one before 2. There's 17 items listed that have got to be in place, which I would kind of like to know that these things are a little bit further on, because we're talking about the principal development. Okay, maybe that's a technical thing, but you know, any of those may well be reject the site. But there's a lot of things there. We've read one of the pages about parking. I don't really know what the parking's going to be. It's a detail thing, but it will meet our standards. We don't really know, and parking is a incredibly contentious thing that's happened through the borough. We've seen on various applications been refused for sort of parking things and problems. Currently, we seem to be referring to the local plan and then not referring to the local plan because it's not there. So sometimes with the report, and I'll go on to explain that, but we say it's basically without the local plan, it's outside in the country, it violates the policy. But maybe the NPPF will try and guide us on that one. But if it was in the plan, then it would be a kind of thing not in the country, because we would have put it in the plan. We've heard about from the councillors Reid's about the infrastructure and this business of the school, so I won't go on about that. I was worried about the comment about the sewage. We've heard that Thames Water say yes, they've looked at it and they can do some works. Well, we're not really sure, can they, will they? We've got the Grampian condition again. I'm unsure, would it solve it? We've got issues in Wade Road and Great Binfields where the sewer that feeds Chinham Sewage Works from Popley, it just smells there. And do we want to go into something we're not sure that what the solution is to allow the principle of development? So I'm concerned about just the assumption we make that it'll all be okay. And then I agree that the report says it's marginally sustainable for transport. We've just learned that the footpaths stop at the bus stop. It's too pushed in. And the traffic, we touched on that. We received at P&I a report about the Kemp Shop roundabout, and obviously the Brighton Hill we're hearing. When we get the plan together, when we understand the traffic, we will have a view of how this may or how we can make this site work. So I'm not actually against the principle of development in the plan. So I guess I'm swearing towards the prematurity that we're not well, I'm not convinced that there's enough there to tell me whether it's right or wrong, and I don't know how I can make a judgment with what I've got. So I've waffled on. That's where I'm sort of stuck, really. I mean, we see the landscape officer says he doesn't like it, but then he refers to the local plan, saying, well, actually, there's been a lot of work done to say actually it probably won't be so bad. But that's the local plan, and we haven't got it yet. Confused, but that's where I am. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to really try and allay Councillor Tomlin's concerns about the level of information with the application. I mean, this is an outline application, has been discussed already, for access and principle. It's entirely common for developments of this scale to have this type of application in. If you think of the likes of Merton Rise, Park Pruitt, Taylor's Farm, Arnell Park, the original one, they have all come forward with an outline application and then subsequently followed up with reserve matters applications. It is part of the planning process. And clearly what we've assessed through the report is with that and with the parameters that we can then condition, we feel that there's enough there for enough control, if you like, for an appropriate form of development to come forward. So taking the example of parking that was quoted, you know, when the reserve matters application comes forward, setting out the layout of the development, it will then bring about all the information you would normally expect in terms of how each house would look, where its parking would be, and at that point you would then effectively control the level of parking. So there is enough information in the application to meet the requirements of an outline planning application as initial part. Just in terms of the issues around, if you like the Thames Water point, again, a Grampian-style condition maintains the council's control over the situation, so nothing can happen on the site until such time as that is satisfied. Now, I appreciate, you might want to know the exact detail right now as to what the final scheme would be, but that wouldn't be a normal sort of situation for an outline application, which, as I say, is a very common tool that is used for developments of this type. And final point, just on the general discussion around prematurity and principle. I mean, as set out on page 20 of the committee report, it clearly sets out the information that was given to the Planning and Infrastructure Committee back in October 2012 when the 5-year housing supply was provided, which says that officers will need to continue to advise whether development should be permitted on greenfield sites in advance of them being formally allocated through the local plan process. And I appreciate that's an officer's comment, but I think it is a legitimate position to be, because we don't have a local plan in place at this moment in time, and we don't have a 5-year housing supply. And the MPPF, although not everyone may agree with its contents, is clearly a very hefty material consideration that we would have to take into account now, and if this application was refused and taken forward at appeal. And I'll go back to the point I made earlier about the significant and demonstrable adverse impacts, whether they outweigh the benefits. The benefits would include this contribution towards housing supply. So if members can just bear that in mind in terms of the test that needs to be met here, it is that specific test that needs to be met before refusal of the application.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike, for those comments. However, I too find myself in agreement with Councillor Reid and Councillor Mrs. Reid and Councillor Mrs. Taylor. Community cohesion for me is all important, and we should not, in my view, be supporting an application which seems to really have taken scant regard for effective community provision. Community cohesion, I beg your pardon. I'm very disappointed with the response from Hampshire County Council regarding education. I'm very disappointed with Hampshire County Council's response regarding roads. The answer we've been given about where these children will be educated at primary school level is simply not good enough. It is not the case that extra places being created at a school which is not as popular as Kempshott will immediately make those parents who've got children at Kempshott move their children out of Kempshott into Parkview. So I can see the children that will live in these houses will be going a very long way to get to school. We know, those of us who've worked in schools, that many of the problems that children have stem from the fact that perhaps they don't attend their local school. They're not able to mix with people that they live close to in the classroom. And I think we should bear that in mind. The traffic situation, the Brighton Hill roundabout is absolutely crucial to any development along the A30, and those of us who worked or lived close to the Brighton Hill roundabout will know that is a very, very congested and, I have to say, very dangerous place for travellers, whether they are on bicycles, on foot or in cars, and they're very dangerous places also for children getting to schools if they have to cross that roundabout. I'm also concerned that we don't seem to have addressed this question of where this western bypass is going to go. And if we approve this application this evening, then it's certainly not going to be able to go through this particular field. So where will it go? And I therefore, again, agree with the comments that have been made already, that I do believe that this is premature and it's not been thought through in the global context. Thank you.
Any other speakers? I'll comment myself in that case. It is quite difficult, I think, to sustain a refusal on the grounds of prematurity in general on a site which is in our paperwork at cabinet level as being a proposed site for allocation. However, it is my view that in this particular case, there is a strong case for prematurity. And my reasoning for that, having listened to all the discussion, is that it's twofold, really. One is the specifics that even though all of the proposed allocated sites are still proposed rather than adopted by this council, it is very clear that the council intends to develop the Many Down land. I mean, that is an intention of the council which is recorded. And the scale of development at the Many Down site is such that it has significant infrastructure implications across the whole of the western side of the borough, and indeed the town centre and the main infrastructure such as Brighton Hill and other critical points on the road network. And it seems to me, therefore, clearly premature that a site which is so clearly linked in terms of being either clearly adjacent to or even on the infrastructure that would be needed for Many Down, allocating it at this point, as opposed to as part of the total process when the infrastructure proposals are clearly defined, is premature. So on that basis, I would think in this particular case, the case for prematurity is strong. But all of the other considerations are really to do with the specifics of the site. If it weren't allocated, one would normally say it's unsustainable. If it's allocated, in a strange sort of sense, it appears to be that an allocated site, that doesn't matter, the fact that it's not, quote, sustainable. You have to make it sustainable. But you make it sustainable through things like infrastructure, and that includes education, community facilities. I'm very open to the comments made by visiting councillors and ward members. It's referred to in some of the applicants' documents as creating a community. But clearly, if you put 1,000 people on a site which is only loosely connected with other neighbouring areas, their community has to somehow develop in the context of those neighbours. Now, if the neighbours don't have any community facilities themselves, you ain't creating a community. And it seems to me that just thinking forward, as part of what we should be doing in the local plan, is to address those issues. And the significant income that's generated by the housing allocated through the local plan, part of that should go on to the broader issue of ensuring that relevant communities are helped to become communities. Not sustainable communities, just communities. So it seems to me that, and one could go at all the other things. I mean, I have a couple of other comments. I was very pleased that the applicant shows maybe enthusiasm even for engaging with ward members and development planning meeting, development control committee members in a pre-application engagement, because members take a different view from officers on aspects of policy, what you do about parking, density, what sort of houses are needed, the mix and all those sorts of things. And it's much nicer if we can get that ahead of time and have a development that members already agree is going to be an excellent development. I don't detect any massive objection anywhere for the principle of development of something at this site. I'm very quite persuaded by the argument about woodland. I don't like describing a street in the town as having a landscape because it's not in the countryside. And I don't like describing as woodland a strip of trees 1 deep or 2 deep. But if they are ancient, then they should, and we propose to protect them, we should be trying to enhance them, and it may be through some engineering of the numbers and the state we can have still a viable and attractive and profitable development for the owners of the land and for the developer, which does more for the trees and more for the local environment and more for local communities and enables community development rather than just talking about it. Clearly travel is an issue here, and again in the scope of the local plan it's something we really should be looking more closely at, and we are through our own analysis, our own modelling of the transport system, because we've not been satisfied with earlier modelling. Clearly, if you develop this site, it is a car-based site, no question about that. The movement on and off the site will predominantly be cars. There'll be some people who'll cycle, and some children might conceivably walk to school, but in my village, where the schools are within half a mile of almost everybody, some of them still drive to school, so it seems to be a sort of irreducible thing. But it's my view that if members, and I'm not hearing anybody wildly enthusiastic for agreeing with the officers that it should go ahead, if members are minded to refuse it, it's my view that the strongest possible grounds for this are the fact that it's premature because of its clear relationship with critical sites which will be developed as opposed to might be developed as part of the local plan. But nobody's made any proposals so far. Councillor Taylor.
Can I propose refusal? Thank you.
We've heard a multitude of reasons for refusal. We need to, well, we can restate them, or officers can advise us on what they've heard. It seems to me that there are 2 levels of it. One is the general level that says that this is premature because it is so closely related to a site that will be developed on a large scale in the local plan and therefore should be thought of in that context when the infrastructure proposals, infrastructure, whatever that document is called, is agreed and signed off, which is not very far off. So that the applicants may not have to wait very long, hopefully. That seems to me the principal reason, but perhaps officers will advise on all the other things they've heard.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just bear in mind there's really a motion for refusal now. Just to pick up on the issue of infrastructure, really, which is I think twofold. One is in relation to the wider infrastructure requirements. So, you know, talk's been this evening on the Western Corridor, or the potential for the need for Western Corridor. I mean, clearly that is work, as you rightly say, which is coming through the local transport assessment of the local plan. I do understand the issue around, well, if you allow this site, would it be better to have that in as part of the sort of thinking, if you like, for when that potentially comes forward in the future? I think the other way of looking at it is, well, if planning permission was granted for this site, it would then become part of the base position for that transport assessment work. So it would have to be factored into that transport assessment work. And I think the position on that prematurity would be much stronger if we were looking at a scenario whereby the Western Corridor was a proposed plan, was a much more definitive plan. At this moment in time, clearly it's something which has been assessed and is being taken forward and more work is being done on it, but it's not a commitment at this time. Similarly, with regards to the Many Down development as a whole, part of it, and obviously the northern part is coming forward in planned period. The other part is outside the next local plan, so it's almost beyond the sort of next local plan, which would be forming part of the prematurity argument. I think with regards to the more local level infrastructure, if you like, and the concerns around community facilities and education, I can understand Councillor Ayres' concerns in terms of the response from Hampshire County Council Education. However, just to explain, if you like, the basis upon which contributions are secured and then spent, clearly there's a scoping process which we've talked about at the DC committee previously, whereby the scopers and the contributors to the Section 106 process will outline a potential requirement and how the monies could be spent to justify taking the contribution in the first place under the SIL regulations. That money then needs to be spent in accordance under the same principles. It's not uncommon, again, bearing in mind the nature of the application, for the precise scheme to not be identified within the Section 106 at this time, for the contributions to be taken, and for those, if you like, infrastructure requirements to be developed up until the point where the scheme is implemented. Because obviously, if planning permission was granted, there's a time period for when it can be constructed. So this isn't an uncommon situation for this type of application, where those infrastructure elements would be produced in more detail at a later stage. So I just want to make those 2 points clear before members continue.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
I mean, listening to Mike again, I mean, I do think there are, in addition really to the prematurity analysis that you made, Chairman, I mean, I do think there are particular things that we can add in. I mean, we know that this is a site that abuts, an ecologically sensitive area, and I don't accept the mitigation that's been offered by the proposals at this juncture. I mean, I think there's a very strong argument for the 50-metre buffer. I think Councillor Terry Reid was able to quote, obviously, experiences elsewhere, and I think there are proper arguments there that ought to be investigated further, and I think probably independent studies beyond what we've had so far ought to be introduced into this. In regard to the road network aspects of this, I mean, here we have a situation where we have a significant strategic site here being proposed in the south of the town. I think we would all accept that. In terms of planning and infrastructure meetings that I've been an attendant at, we've only started the traffic study and got it as far as we have, and even within that, the massive problems that we're going to be experienced in the future in respect to the Kempshott roundabout and the Brighton Hill roundabout. I mean, some of it was farcical, to be frank, in terms of some of the figures we saw from the consultants there, none of which had resolution at that stage and needed lots more planning and design to overcome the problems of waiting times for this massive increase in traffic. This site will exacerbate that. And until that study, along with everything you've said in terms of the major development that will take place at Manidown, have been taken into consideration, I say again, this is a premature application and we should reject it on those bases alone, I think. I think that gives us 3 at the very least there, Chairman.
Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to comment on what Mike Townsend has just said. I think you suggested that maybe this should be part of a basis for where we put our road rather than the other way round, and I think that is completely the wrong way round. I think we need to decide on our infrastructure first and work out our housing around that. If for no other reason, the people who are going to buy these houses probably need to know if there's going to be a big road flung over the top of them or around the side of them. At least if we know where our roads are going to go, then housing can adjust itself around that, and that has to be the right way. It would be terribly unsatisfactory to have housing estates you've got to somehow cut through over or round. And also, it's for us then to decide how far west or east we want this road and what fits in best with Junction 7, etc. And also, as far as infrastructure is concerned, I agree that I think 2 of our speakers mentioned both the Brighton Hill roundabout and Junction 7. We know that neither of those are satisfactory now, and so we do need to look at those before we start loading more traffic onto it. That's another thing that we can look at in the broader picture if we take a wide-angled view of it. Personally, I would also like to include a little bit more than that if we can. Our Safe Planning Policy E1 suggests that development should provide safe and convenient access for all potential users. And I'm not satisfied that this is safe and convenient. don't see how it can be. And create attractive public spaces. I don't see any public spaces here. And on that same subject, our policy A2, which encourages walking, cycling and the use of public transport, says that cycling and walking infrastructure should be integrated with the development and linked with surrounding networks. We really haven't got that linkage here at all, I don't think. I think it falls down on that completely. Once again, if we've got a broader picture, we might be able to link it to some things, but we haven't got anything to link it to yet. And I also think we should mention landscape character as well, which is one of the key issues that were brought by one of our speakers. I think we have got MPPF paragraphs that could be brought in. I don't know whether to read them out. Obviously, officers will know what paragraph 109 and 118 are. We've also got our own policy E6, where you've got to make sure that there's visual amenity and scenic quality, and where the setting of a settlement, including important views to, across and out of settlements, should be respected and improved. And I think on our walk, we just can't say that. So those, for me, would be some additional reasons for refusing at this stage.
Officers have been writing furiously. It's been moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour of refusal? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against refusal? That's moved. That's approved. Refused. It's approved. It's agreed. It's agreed to refuse. I'll get that right. The comment I would make really, just for the record, is that we should not and are not now, in my opinion, at the point in the local plan where we regard it as some long-term distant prospect. And the message clearly from this committee to PI is get on with it. Let's have the infrastructure plan. Let's have all of those things put in place. Let's get the sites allocated and let's get the infrastructure determined so that the whole thing is holistic. And I think part of the reason why I do believe this is premature, I think it wouldn't be premature if all of that was a year hence, but all of that is supposed to go out to consultation in the next few weeks. So, you know, we are very slightly premature, but we are premature, and the factors in it are critical. Have you got enough down there? Yeah, sure.
Chair, just on the reasons for refusal, I just want to clarify a couple of points on the prematurity argument. I took from that it was more in relation to specifically the infrastructure requirements of transport from the discussion regarding the impact on Brighton Hill roundabout, Junction 7, the potential for the Western Corridor, etc. So it is specifically prematurity in relation to the transport infrastructure needs, was what I took from the discussion.
On schools is simply that the response from the educational authority is not convincing and does not answer the question about schools. You can't expect them to answer a question about schools in the context of the local plan because we haven't got to that yet, but they will have to. You know, when we know where the sites are for the local plan, the education strategy should take account of the whole thing. But if somebody comes up with a proposition that says kids could be taken out of this school because we've built another one somewhere else, then the county will have to rethink that one because it's just simply not plausible. But I don't think that's a prematurity thing. It's simply that we don't believe the answer. The answer is not a credible answer.
I mean, it is exactly that, Chairman, I think. And as Councillor Taylor said and others, I mean, for the proposition, I know it's built around the sort of financial contributions that county could make it, but to say we would presume children from somewhere else would free up spaces for children from this site is just, I just think is unacceptable as an argument, really, and as a matter of fact. And it's not an elitist argument, I hope, on my part, but I don't believe that in the context of the choices that will be available to parents, end of. In regard to the traffic aspects of this, I mean, I haven't put it as well as I should, really, but it just seems to me we are entitled to make reference to the work that's going on in planning infrastructure on the road network study, which is yet to be drawn to any, in my view, formulated conclusions and offer solutions in regard to the massive problems that are anticipated in terms of the local plan provisions over a period. And until that's been worked up more than it has, it seems to me that strategic sites of this sort, but ad hoc applications of this sort can be resisted on that basis alone. But you're absolutely right, Chairman, there's a lot of work to do very quickly, and if we're going to be anywhere near the position of going out to proper public consultation in the months ahead, that work has got to be accelerated. I'm with you on that, and you may be surprised at that on occasions, but I am tonight with you on that.
And Chair, from the discussion, the other reasons for refusal I had were with regards to the ecological impact. I assume that's specifically in relation to the impact on the sinks on the northern and western boundaries. The impact on, with regards to policy E1 and the fact that not a safe and convenient access has been demonstrated. I mean, I would stress that clearly with the support of Hampshire County Council, who have raised no objection to the application, that is clearly an extremely difficult position to defend at appeal, but I'll take the members' view.
Well, what members heard was that a footpath stops. If a footpath stops, it's not easy and convenient and ready access. If a footpath joins up, it might be 5 miles, but at least it's joined up. I live in a place where footpaths don't join up, and I can tell you it means people can't walk on that road because the road's too dangerous.
So just to be clear, it's not the vehicular access that members have a concern with, it's specifically the fact that all users have not been catered for, if you like, in a safe and convenient way because of the footpath links. Okay, thank you. With regards to policy A2, the fact that cycling and walking infrastructure is inadequate, and finally the impact with regards to landscape character and the references made by Councillor Taylor to the MPPF and policy E6 and the setting of Basingstoke as a settlement. If those are the main reasons for refusal, I would suggest also one additional reason with regards to the standard, if you like, position that because Section 106 hasn't been signed at this time, we would normally put that condition on in the event of an appeal. It would then be withdrawn if the Section 106 is signed at that time.
It was suggested also that this is an overdevelopment, that it's some 60 houses more than was recommended. If that would be a suitable reason.
Right. Well, I will, as usual, review with officers the formalised wording of the reasons for refusal. I just would like to comment finally on this, that I would very strongly urge ward members and the applicant to get together and start the process of looking at what you'd really like to see here. There may be many people who think this site should not be developed, and that is always the case with anything in the local plan. And it's always difficult to persuade yourself to sit down and have that sort of discussion when you don't like the whole thing at all. But it makes much more sense to sit down with an applicant and really talk through, preferably with officer support, what really makes sense here and what's required around it and what's required near it, not all of which will be provided by the applicant. But hanging back from that, when there is a really serious chance that since it's listed by the Cabinet that the site will be developed, is a great mistake. And I would strongly urge that councillors, and where there's parish council involvement, parish councillors engage positively on what would happen there, rather than leaving that until after the site allocation process is finished in this particular case. Further business, the meeting is adjourned, is closed at 25 past 8.